Welcome to Gold Era Sports. My name is Jon Goldfarb. Join me for the January 9th weekend NFL playoff predictions or wildcard weekend. Hey there, we all know 2020 is finally over, so I figured I would begin 2021 with talking about my two passions. Everything sports, whether it's professional, collegiate, or high school sports on occasion. And you guessed it, food. Nothing goes together better. This January 9th weekend, the NFL playoffs begin with 6 games. Let's get started with my predictions on who will win this wild card weekend. The first game to air is the Indianapolis Colts versus Buffalo Bills at 1:05 p.m. Eastern Time on CBS. The Colts finished the regular season with an 11-5 record by taking second place in the AFC South, but they missed out on the cherry on top to the Tennessee Titans. More about those guys later. The Colts head to Western New York to clash with the AFC East champion Buffalo Bills, who finished the regular season with a 13-3 record. Sorry about that. For the Colts, veteran quarterback Philip Rivers completed 369 of 543 passes for 4,169 yards while throwing 24 touchdowns as well as 11 interceptions. While the Bills quarterback Josh Allen had an MVP-like regular season by completing 396 of 572 passes for 4,544 yards with 37 touchdowns against 10 interceptions. On the ground, the Colts' leading rusher was rookie Jonathan Taylor, who led the team with 232 carries for 1,169 rushing yards and scored 11 touchdowns, while the Bills' Devin Singletary had 156 carries for 687 rushing yards and scored 2 touchdowns. Sorry about that. On the receiving end, the Colts' T.Y. Hilton had 56 receptions for 762 yards and scored 5 touchdowns, while the Bills' Stephon Diggs had 127 receptions for 1,535 yards and scored 8 touchdowns. I know what most of you are thinking. The Bills hosting a playoff game at home and possibly winning it sounds ludicrous, since they haven't won a playoff game since December 30th, 1995 against the Miami Dolphins. Well, even though Philip Rivers is the veteran and has more playoff experience than Josh Allen, as well as the better running back in the game, I think the Bills earned their first playoff win since 1995 under Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs, as well as their defense, helping them advance to the AFC divisional round in a 33-17 victory. Second game is between the Los Angeles Rams and the Seattle Seahawks at 4:40 p.m. Eastern Time on Fox. Our second game is on Saturday, is between two bitter NFC West rivals. For the Rams, who finished the season 10-6 and in second place, their leading passer, Jared Goff, finished the regular season by completing 370 of 552 passes for 3,952 yards, scored 20 touchdowns, and threw 13 interceptions, while the Seahawks' Russell Wilson, who helped the Seahawks capture the NFC West with a 12-4 record, completed 384 of 558 passes for 4,212 yards, threw 40 touchdowns against 13 interceptions. My apologies about that. On the ground, the Rams' leading rusher was Cam Akers with 145 carries for 625 yards and 2 rushing touchdowns, while the Seahawks' Chris Carson had 141 carries for 681 yards and scored 5 rushing touchdowns. On the receiving end, the Rams' Cooper Kupp caught 92 receptions for 974 yards and scored 3 touchdowns, while the Seahawks' DK Metcalf caught 83 receptions for 1,303 yards and scored 10 touchdowns. Both the Rams and Seahawks running game is a little bit stingy coming into this game, but both their leading wide receivers can lead defenders cold when they catch passes. But don't underestimate the Rams defense led by Aaron Donald. I honestly believe this will be a close one in favor of the Seahawks in a 21-17 victory. The third game is between the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Washington Football Team at 8:15 p.m. Eastern Time on NBC. Our last Saturday night game is with Tom Brady leading the Buccaneers on the road against the Washington Football Team, who finished the regular season with a 7-9 record, becoming the third playoff team with a losing record. On a personal note, I love seeing Tom Brady on the Bucs and not playing for my personal enemy team, the New England Patriots. For the Bucs, TB12 completed 401 of 610 passes for 4,633 yards and scored 40 touchdowns against 12 interceptions, while Washington's Alex Smith, who should be named Comeback Player of the Year, led his team by completing 168 of 252 passes for 1,582 yards and scored 6 touchdowns against 8 interceptions. On the ground, Bucs running back Ronald Jones had 192 carries for 978 yards and scored 7 touchdowns, while Washington's Antonio Gibson had 170 carries for 795 yards and scored 11 touchdowns. On the receiving end, the Bucs' Mike Evans had 70 receptions for 1,006 yards and hauled in 13 touchdowns, while Terry McLaurin had 87 receptions for 1,118 yards and scored 4 touchdowns. For the Tom Brady bandwagon, y'all are thinking he's got this candy bar in the bag. Meanwhile, this is his first playoff game without the legendary coach Bill Belichick coaching him, as well as his first wildcard playoff game on the road. Washington's Alex Smith should perform okay, but I believe the Buccaneers overpower Washington 35-14. So now, my friends, I'm getting pretty hungry. Not kidding right now. So let's get to the kitchen and whip up some wildcard nachos. Fourth game this Sunday is between the Baltimore Ravens and the Tennessee Titans. Sunday, 1:05 p.m. Eastern Time on ESPN and ABC. We have a divisional round rematch between the Ravens, hoping to get my guy Lamar Jackson his first playoff win in Nashville against the Titans. For full disclosure, I am originally a Baltimore guy, and that's enough said. For passing, Lamar Jackson completed 242 of 376 passes for 2,757 yards, scored 26 touchdowns against 9 interceptions, while Ryan Tannehill completed 315 of 481 passes for 3,819 yards, scored 33 touchdowns against 7 interceptions. On the ground, quarterback Lamar Jackson led the Ravens with 159 carries with 1,005 rushing yards and scored 7 touchdowns, while Derrick Henry had 378 carries for 2,027 rushing yards and scored 17 touchdowns. On the receiving end, Marquise Hollywood Brown caught 58 receptions for 769 yards and scored 8 touchdowns, while A.J. Brown caught 70 receptions for 1,075 yards and scored 11 touchdowns. Let's see. My Ravens were bullied in their home playground last year for their prized Snicker bar in the lunch bag by Derrick Henry's punishing runs. This time the Ravens head to Nashville to take what is theirs. I believe the Ravens defeat the Titans 28-24 in a nail-biter. Fifth game, Chicago Bears versus the New Orleans Saints at 4:40 p.m. Eastern Time on CBS, and you're hearing this correct, Nickelodeon. We have an NFC clash between the 8-8 Bears barely getting the last bag of chips out of the vending machine versus the NFC South champions, the New Orleans Saints, led by Drew Brees. For the Bears, Mitch Trubisky completed 199 of 297 passes for 2,055 yards, scored 16 touchdowns, and threw 8 interceptions, while the Saints' Drew Brees completed 275 of 390 passes for 2,942 yards, scored 24 touchdowns against 6 interceptions. On the ground, David Montgomery had 247 carries for 1,070 rushing yards and scored 8 touchdowns, while Alvin Kamara, who is on the COVID list as of this recording, thoughts and prayers go to him and his family, had 187 carries for 932 rushing yards and scored 16 touchdowns. On the receiving end, Allen Robinson caught 102 receptions for 1,250 yards and scored 6 touchdowns. Please come to the Ravens next season. While Alvin Kamara caught 83 receptions for 756 yards and scored 5 receiving touchdowns. The Saints are a 10-point favorite at home, but because of the COVID pandemic and with Kamara being out as of this recording, he may be back in the lineup after he tweeted earlier in the week, "See you Sunday." The Saints will not have an easy time on the field, but I don't see Chicago advancing. I picked the Saints winning 24-20. Sixth and last game of the wild card weekend, the Cleveland Browns versus the Pittsburgh Steelers at 8:15 p.m. Eastern Time on NBC. A true AFC North rivalry game between two teams that clashed last weekend, giving the Browns the win and their first playoff appearance since 2002 when Tim Couch was their quarterback. This is going to be a fun one, folks. Browns quarterback Baker Mayfield completed 305 of 486 passes. Sorry about that. For 3,563 yards and scored 26 touchdowns against 8 interceptions, while Steelers' legendary quarterback Ben Roethlisberger completed 399 of 608 passes for 3,803 yards, scored 33 touchdowns against 10 interceptions. On the ground, Browns running back Nick Chubb had 190 carries for 1,067 rushing yards and scored 12 touchdowns, while Pittsburgh's James Conner had 169 carries for 721 rushing yards and scored 6 touchdowns. On the receiving end, Jarvis Landry caught 72 receptions for 840 yards and scored 3 touchdowns, while Deontay Johnson caught 88 receptions for 923 yards and scored 7 touchdowns. As Terrell Owens once said, "Get your popcorn ready," because this is going to be one of the best games of the weekend. Even though Cleveland has ended the longest playoff drought in the NFL, they will be without head coach Kevin Stefanski, who is unfortunately on the COVID list. But Mike Pfeiffer, I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong, please correct me in the comment section, will be the acting head coach for Cleveland. Roethlisberger is a playoff veteran who knows how to play great in the playoffs, but don't sleep on the Browns. Mayfield may not be as talented as Roethlisberger, but like Jim McMahon from the 1985 Super Bowl champion Chicago Bears, he's good enough to get you where you need to go. I picked the Browns in a 35-31 upset on the road against the Steelers. Those are my picks. I hope you enjoy them, my friends. Now, the snack for the Sunday wildcard game, I'm going with pretzels. The twisted shapes is how these games might go. So thank you for watching. Please click that like button, subscribe, follow me on Twitter at JGoldfarb1993, and I will see you guys next time. Enjoy wildcard weekend.